welcome, Calvary. I am sitting here with Chris and Elizabeth McKinney. They co-authored the book Placed for a Purpose. And Chris and his whole family and Elizabeth were actually at our St. Charles campus 2 Sundays ago. So I'm really excited to be sitting back with them as they have some amazing stories and some experience and some expertise when it comes to neighboring. And so we just want to thank you guys for joining us. This is going to bless our people on the website and digitally. So yes, we give thanks for you guys doing this interview. And I just wanted to kick us off with the question of, how did you guys get into neighboring? Like, what are some of the ways that God planted the passion and the conviction in your heart? And was there a moment, or maybe it was a slow burn, that kind of led you into the neighboring space?
Well, it was probably more out of desperation, I'd say, and loneliness. Really, we say we weren't looking for more ministry to do, and I think Chris mentioned that when he spoke at Calvary. But we were in a season of our lives where we had 4 kids in 5 years, and I was buried in diapers, and I just thought, I need some people around me. I'm not going to make it if I don't have somebody next door that I can count on. Like, I think he said this when he was with you too, but if we had to drive across town 15 minutes for community, it wasn't going to happen. So we decided to throw a little fish fry and invite the neighbors over and have some fish tacos. And we're kind of foodies in that way. And so we connected with these people. Like he mentioned Bingo, the 7-foot tall basketball player guy with the Friars. And it was like, we love Bingo. We need Bingo. And so we started getting to know them. And over time, we thought, hey, we should do a few more of these things. And so I think he shared part of that journey too, of just the Easter egg hunt and then getting to know people and doing the block parties. And along the way, we just kind of had this sense, as we saw people were starved for that community just as much as we were, we had the sense of, this is really special. Like, people are responding to this. And then, like, it was crazy, kind of even the scale of it. It started off super small, but it was just, people were really responsive. And as that began to happen, we just kept asking God, what are you doing? What is this? Because we knew it was really different from our time in campus ministry. And that's why we wrote the book, Place for a Purpose. It was kind of everything we wish we had known when we started, really looking to value the crock pot of ministry, the low and slow, over necessarily what we'd experienced, which was great too, but the microwave where things came fast and it was a lot of fun. But this was different, and we started to see spiritual conversations take place over time, and we started to see the social fabric of our neighborhood strengthened, and we were connecting with people from all different ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, different ways of life, and building those relationships. And we started to see people follow Jesus. And so, that was we kind of stumbled into it in a way, but we say it's the most selfish ministry ever, because it is so enriching for our lives. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So what are some ways, you guys are in Columbia, Missouri, so kind of just down the road, but in a little bit of a different context, but not too different. What are some ways just in Columbia, like some specific ways that you guys have seen God move? What has God revealed to you, like in that neighborhood? Are you guys from there originally or from somewhere very different? Yeah, we'd love to hear all of that.
Yeah. So ways that we've seen God move. So we are doing part of what our job right now is we get to love, serve, and reach out to our next door neighbors. But then we're associate staff at our church, the Crossing here in Columbia. And so we also serve as like the neighboring ministries co-director. So it's very grassroots kind of a ministry right now. And so we've had probably 15 or so families around the city who are also trying to love and reach out to their neighbors in very intentional ways. And so I think one of the things that stands out to me that we've seen not only in our neighborhood, but in others, and especially in our cultural moment, we like Elizabeth said, we are getting to interact with people who are very different than us. And I think what you see right now is an increased polarization, an increased kind of entrenchment in our views, and what we think is the right course maybe for our country, or even what our world views. And it is more and more keeping us from interacting with people because we're picking sides. And so I think one of the big things that I get the most excited about is that, like, we're getting to not only ourselves interact with people who we would have never interacted with had it not been for some of these neighboring events and the things that we do for fun, but really, like, they're excuses to rub shoulders with people who we wouldn't normally cross paths with. And then in these other neighborhoods across Columbia, we're seeing all these other people who belong to our church, and they're trying these things. They're getting to do the same thing, and it's helping them move out of their bubbles and move into the lives of people who they would have never connected with. And so, yeah, do we agree and connect on every single thing? No, but acceptance doesn't equal agreement. So I can accept my neighbor and the people who look different than me, vote different than me, think different than me, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with every step. And we've found the more that we're asking questions and trying to understand where people are coming from, the more they then turn around and, that trust is built, and they want to hear some of those things as well. And, I think, so not only that, but there's also been, like she said, the strengthening of the social fabric of these communities, neighbors coming out of isolation, and then just the spiritual growth that we're seeing in people, both in our neighborhood and across Columbia. Seeing people take those little steps, valuing those little steps, trying to run. We talk about running at the spiritual pace of your neighbor. So, you have a running partner, you don't want to run too fast, because then you're going to be discouraged. Be like, I can't keep up with that guy. I hate running anyway. Or if you run too slow and I'm running, I'm like, hey, I'm kind of getting into this. I want to go. You're all the way back there. I'm going to find somebody else. And so just trying to match that pace, identify as a Christian, and then just see, oh, they're becoming spiritually interested, or they're slowing down. That's okay. I'll slow down. Even if it's for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm here. I'm in their lives. And so I think those two things for me stand out as things that I'm really excited about, that's happening in our neighborhood and across Columbia.
Yeah. That running partner analogy. Yeah, that's beautiful. That'll preach, Chris. I'll preach.
Go for it. Take it. Use it.
Yeah. So in your guys' book, you guys make a really good argument. You talk about how in some ways we can now curate our neighbors. And like in curating or choosing our neighbors in different contexts, we've actually kind of neglected our physical neighbors that live next to us. Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that? Just going off like, okay, acceptance doesn't always mean agreement. Mm-hmm. Our neighbors in physical proximity, we don't get to necessarily handpick them, right? Like they're going to come from a variety of backgrounds with a variety of disagreements and whatever. Yeah, how do we step into that? And could you just say more on that?
Yeah, there's a great book, Mark Dunkelmeyer, I think, but the title is The Vanishing Neighbor, and it's a secular book, and in it he talks about how there needs to be 3 rings in our society. In your inner ring is kind of your close friends, family, everybody you'd think would be in that one. The middle ring is meant to be your neighborhood connections, and kind of the other like club, association, kind of connections in your community. Then your outer ring is this affinity groups, like people like, I'm a Chiefs fan. So, it'd be all my Chiefs fans out there, or it could be a political group, or, maybe a bigger cause. And what he said is over time, mainly with the advent of our cell phones and technology, we are now staying in touch with our inner ring a lot more because of cell phone and all that thing, which isn't bad. That's good. But then we're able to connect with people in the outer ring a lot easier. So for example, in the 50s or 60s, if I moved to Denver and I wanted to talk football and hang out and engage, I'd have to talk to my neighbor who's a Denver Broncos fan because I don't know where to find the Chiefs fans in Denver. I don't have an iPhone. And so there was a need for that neighbor. That neighbor filled a spot. Yeah. And that's actually probably going to be very good for me to have to talk to someone who didn't share my same football affiliation. But now,
so there's no middle ring as much anymore.
Now if I move, I can just search and I don't need my neighbors. And so I think one thing that we need to switch kind of our mindset is our address isn't an accident, and we need our neighbors, and it's actually going to be a good thing to begin to interact with those people. And it might be more challenging, but it's going to be worth it in the long run.
And I'll give a little phrase. I would say it's like winning the lottery if you can actually say this phrase. It's worth $1 million, but no one actually wants to do it, it seems. Is to say the words, I can understand where you're coming from, or I can see where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. And those words go so far. If you're in a conversation with someone and they're saying something maybe you don't agree with, we don't have to win. We don't have to get our point across and kind of try to cut them off at the pass and explain our point of view. Sometimes the best medicine for our souls is just to be heard. And if you can show up to a neighbor who might be really different from you, and as they're saying something that sounds different or it's a hard thing to hear, just say the words, yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Help me understand more. Tell me more about why you think that. Like, I want to understand more.
That goes so far. I mean, in your marriage too, or as a parent, I'm like, if we could just know this phrase, the world would change. But really, it's such a validating phrase, and it goes so far in neighboring. And what's cool is that it does kind of come back around. I've seen relationships where we've done so much work to try to understand that other person and really show up kind of listening in that posture of listening and validating, and then to see that come full circle where in one relationship I have with someone, she's an atheist and we think really differently. And we kind of had this moment of vulnerability where she put me on the spot about something and asked me about something that felt kind of heavy and weighty. And I was honest with her and told her, and I was thinking in my head, okay, this is the real me. What's she going to say? And she just responded right back, because we had 5 years of history and close. Yeah. So that's a cool thing when you offer that, and then to receive that back from a non-believing neighbor is really cool.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. I think that brings clarity. I think that's super helpful. So I feel like you've already given us a couple tips and tricks already, just like naturally in our conversation. But if you had just like 2 or 3 tips or tricks, like neighboring hacks, if you want to call them, like things that you guys have had a little bit of success with, maybe in your context, that you think could be like transplanted to even a little bit different context, what are a couple things that you'd share with people, like to equip them to, hey, even if this is your very first step neighboring, maybe this is something, it's achievable, you can do it. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Well, and studies are actually showing, there's research out there right now that 50% of Americans have what they're calling re-entry anxiety. And people they're actually nervous about kind of re-entering this whole new time, not necessarily coming out of COVID, but moving forward into our new normal. So I think having a few neighboring hacks, like you called them, I like that phrase, up our sleeves is really going to be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, so for our context, and this may not translate to like an apartment complex, but a portable fire pit is like one of the best investments we ever made, like $20 from Walmart. And we've set that out in the front. And I mean, if you have kids around, s'mores is a great option, but it just, inviting some neighbors over to sit by the fire, even just to have a little bit of food or drink, or just like little happy hour. Like, I don't know, there's something about a fire and a fire pit and some camp chairs that just really sets like a great just atmosphere of connecting. So that's one. And, I think doing just a little like food or a little bit of drink, like that's always helpful. And if you can find a common space outside or a common space at an apartment complex. But another thing that's been really good is to ask people to bring something too. Because I think a lot of times we show up and we think, okay, I'm going to love my neighbors. And that means doing everything and being kind of like the savior. And what we found is as we, it's good to want to provide, and we kind of have that impulse to want to serve, but we found that when we say, hey, let's do a little barbecue, 5 to 7, we'll do the hamburgers and hot dogs, but could you guys bring a side and a dessert? And could you guys, and it just brings this, it just levels the playing field. No one's trying to like be the saviors, and it creates buy-in, and it strengthens the connection somehow. It's really interesting when people have brought stuff.
Well, and even broader for that, just asking for help, period.
That's a hack. That's a big neighboring
hack. Think about
yeah.
what you need. I mean, we all have needs. And I mean, we live in the suburbs, and it's ridiculous to me, all the stuff that people have in the suburbs. There's no reason for us to have all this stuff. We should be sharing with our neighbors. Our next door neighbor, she, for a lot of years, she was a single mom, and she has bad allergies. So she had this big riding lawnmower, which we didn't have. And so I can't remember if you offered or she asked.
Yeah, we
were
talking about it. And then, and I maybe offered, and she's like, well, if you could use my riding lawnmower. If you would cut my grass, then you can use it on your lawn. And maybe we'll split the maintenance fees. And I was like, done, this is perfect. So we buy
the gas and help repair it, and we use her lawnmower.
But even just little things of asking for help, and then you can repay with like, hey, I would love to have you over and to say thank you. It's just.
Yeah.
A couple things that seem more minor, but I would say are huge, are one, making that awkward reintroduction. If you've made it before, or if you've never made it, making that for the first time, it's and when you think about neighboring for dummies, it's like, well, learn their names is 101. Yeah. We got to say hi. We've got to introduce ourselves, and if we've already met them, it's humbling. Just say the words, but just say the words. I'm Elizabeth. I know we've met. It's been several years back, but I've forgotten your name. Remind me, please. And then write it on a note in your phone. I have a neighboring note that I write people's names and their kids' names, and sometimes their dogs' names, because we live in a culture where people just don't pay attention. So if you pay attention, that's huge. So reintroduce yourself, put your phone down. I mean, that's another kind of neighboring but putting our phones down and not just being like this, but being like this, having that posture of attentiveness. Mm-hmm. and just another obvious, but waving, saying hello, and not demeaning those as like small, those are the two small acts, but no, those, it's a wave that leads to a smile, that leads to a hello, or a name that leads to a relationship, that leads to chat on your driveway, that leads to eventually maybe that person coming to Christ one day. So don't underestimate the importance of those small neighborly acts.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think to me and my wife Haley's experience, we're first-time homeowners, and so a lot of those just like snow shovel, lawn care elements, like you just don't have all those moving from a one-bedroom apartment. You acquire those over time, and so there's been some good conversations just come out of just need of knocking on neighbor's door. Hey, can I use your snow shovel? Right. Hey, can I use the seed spreader? Like whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's good. I really resonate with you guys sharing that. Of sometimes it's actually us asking, and maybe your gut feels a little bit like it's a burden, but I think in all reality, a lot of times they would love to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can come back and make dinner for them, or, ask them over for dinner. I mean, if you feel comfortable, or sit outside. You can repay the favor too. Yeah,
that's great. So kind of follow up to that is, how has neighboring shaped, molded, matured you guys, like in the process? Like how has God worked in your family and your marriage and you guys individually, just as you've been in this neighboring process and neighboring journey? Because I think we often view it as, okay, we're like shaping where we're placed, which is very true. Like we're shaping the soil, but also like we're being shaped in the soil in the thorns and the thistles and the rocks and the dirt. How have you guys been shaped in that? I'd love to just hear your heartbeat a little bit behind that.
Do you want to go first?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One, you asked about our family, and I think about our kids. If you're a believer who wants to shape your kids and help them have a heart to have people come to know Christ, I think I used to think, we could take them on a mission trip one day, which would be super cool. And I would love to do that with my kids. But I love that our kids have grown up praying daily for our neighbors to come to know Jesus. I mean, there is no better place, I want to say, than like for them to experience that missional part of who we are as followers of Christ than in their own neighborhood and in ways that are as simple as that a child can do, to wave and to smile and to begin kind of sowing those seeds. So I think that as a mom has been such an incredible thing to watch that heart develop in our kids, because they've been a part of it since day one with us from the very beginning. So they've seen neighbors come to Christ. They've seen the low and slow. They've lived it with us. I think for me, as far as my own shape, like being shaped by it, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think about the passage in Jeremiah where he's encouraging the Israelites in exile to pray for the welfare of the city, for in its welfare they would find welfare. And I just think we have been so blessed. We have been so encouraged by the relationships. And I think for me, I used to probably have this mindset, maybe even subconsciously, that to have an influence for Christ, we kind of had to like be good witnesses, like kind of, like let our light shine. And that is good. Like you need to be a light, and you don't want your to lose your saltiness in a sense. Like that is you are different in that sense because you have Christ, but it's just because of that you have Christ, and it's okay for them to see our need for a savior, and that we are not it's not through our perfection. Maybe there are some good works that they see, hopefully that they'll get a taste of heaven, but they're not seeing our righteousness and drawn to Christ through our righteousness, because they've definitely seen our brokenness. You can't hide it at home, right here. So they see our imperfections, and that's I think that's been a really good thing. It's humbling and it's vulnerable, but it's been a really good thing.
Yeah. I would say, and this is funny, I've been in vocational ministry for almost 20 years. And so it's kind of like, well, duh, haven't you had this mindset? But I think neighboring has really helped enlarge and open my eyes to the fact that God is working, like all the time. He's working. And so with neighboring, I've had to embrace the low and slow. It's taking time. It's valuing the little steps. And so now I just am like, God could be working over there. God could be working in that neighbor's heart. And yeah, I don't know them super well, but I might. Like I've seen crazier things have happened with other neighbors over the course of 8, 9, 10 years. And so I don't know. There's just this expectancy that God is at work, and I'm getting to play a role in the way he's gifted me, and I can celebrate that. And, our restrictions are coming down here in Columbia. So we actually got to schedule our block party that we haven't gotten to do for a couple, or at least a year now. It's been 2 years since our last one. And I am just like, who knows what God is going to do? Who knows who he's going to connect me with? And I'm going to be slinging cotton candy and saying hi to neighbors, and it works. So it's just really opened my eyes to that he's at work everywhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much for being vulnerable and just sharing, and much appreciated.
Yeah.
As we get close to wrapping up, I've had a few questions for you guys, but anything else just that's left on the table that you would love to share for Calvary and for Big C Church as a whole? Any elements or learning moments or tips for neighboring that you think would be helpful for the people of God?
I mean, something I've been thinking about is just, we talk about how it's important to self-identify as a Christian and not be ashamed that this is this is who I am, running at that person's spiritual pace, but also taking risks. I think just sharing the real you, and then sharing about your connections with Christ and Jesus. And I say that as a something I want to keep growing in. I forget the way you phrased it, but like a learning, like kind of a learning point or something. It's just, I want to keep sharing with my neighbors about what I'm learning of Jesus. Right now we're studying the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, and thinking a lot about how that can be lived out in a neighboring context. Like, what does it mean what did these words mean? These words of Jesus. And so I want to bring that into my conversations with my neighbors. I'm studying this ancient teaching of Jesus through the Beatitudes, have them look at it. But just that, I think neighbors now more than ever, they don't want your faith from 10 years ago. They want a live, living, active faith. Like, how is this? We've even had non-believing neighbors say that to us. Like, what difference does this make in your life now? They want to know. And not for perfection, but just they want to see that lived out. So don't be afraid to share what you're learning, and it's kind of a challenge to us as believers to be in the Word and be learning, be growing, not in a legalistic way, but just in let's live this out. Let's share it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like a final thought would just be, again, as we look at where our culture is, what the views of Christians are by a lot of non-Christians, and just kind of after the last couple of years we've had, like, I really think, like, for the mission of the church, for the gospel to continue to go out and God's kingdom to come more and more, like, neighboring is the way forward. Like, loving your next door neighbor is the way forward. And it's loving them in tangible ways. It's serving them. It's finding common ground and caring about the common good of the neighborhood, because we are believers and we care about that. And it's through those actions and through those relationships that the gospel is going to go out, and we're going to have contact with people who maybe we would have never had contact, or the church as a whole would have never had contact with, because we can sometimes live in a bubble. And so, just as an encouragement, like, I think there's incredible opportunity right now for the demonstration, for us to show and tell about who God is and his love through loving our next door neighbors.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's awesome, guys. Thank you so much. I'm just going to kind of wrap us here. And thank you so much, Chris and Elizabeth McKinney. Place for a Purpose is their book. I know you can find it on Amazon, as well as probably a bunch of other different places. And they are in Colombia, living, loving well in the soil God has placed them there. And so we're super grateful for your time. Thank you for joining us. And I can't wait for our people to see this and be encouraged and grown by it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Have a good one.